Good morning. Good morning. And I do want to begin by acknowledging the terrible fires in Los Angeles. I know I'm not alone. I'm sure all of you have friends and family that live in Los Angeles. You know, Audrey and Billy lived in Los Angeles themselves and came down here today. Well, Los Angeles is a big, big area, so everyone is not involved, and yet at the same time, we're all involved. They're so close to us. And so I'm just feeling really grateful that the winds have calmed down. And I'm just knowing that there is already a possibility of hope again. And what is ours to do? Maybe we're going to find out things that we will be able to do. But to start with, I just wanted to share a few words from a minister, David Alt. And he suggested that we remind ourselves that even in the apparent absence of wholeness, there is wholeness. Even in the apparent absence of solution, there is solution. Even in the apparent absence of right action, there is right action. And even in the apparent absence of love, there is love. And by thinking this way, we are not being delusional. We are not acting like ostriches with our heads buried in the sand, ignoring what is going on outside our little hidey hole. We are actually using the power of creative mind in a positive way. So what is this creative mind that I'm talking about? Anyway, well, first let me say that Creative Mind is the title of the first book that Ernest Holmes wrote. And if you've been involved in religious science for a while, you know that when we speak of creative mind, we're speaking of what other people call God or Spirit, that eternal and infinite unity of consciousness behind everything, and actually not just behind it, for it is everything, and more than everything. But we are also using a term that is based in the understanding that spirit is not static, it's not fixed. It is always unfolding, creating by becoming its creation, yet it's never used up or diminished in any way. If you've been here before, you've heard this before. In fact, it might seem like a really basic idea to you, kind of old hat, so to speak. But that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because it's easy for us, those of us who have been around this teaching a long time, to just kind of take it for granted. So I wanted to suggest that now, at the beginning of the year, is the perfect time for us to clear the cobwebs off of our thinking and dust off some of these basic ideas and consider really giving them a place of prominence in the upcoming year, in this day. Giving these ideas a place of power in our daily life. So I'm going to say, do you even remember the first time you heard someone say, change your thinking, change your life? Or heard someone say, there's a power for good and you can use it? Or maybe you first heard someone say, think and grow rich. Or what about, everyone is always doing their best. So I actually remember when I heard that, because I was in high school and our high school counselor came into the room and was trying to give us a pep talk about, I don't know, doing better, whatever. But he said, getting along, I guess, with each other. And he said, everyone is always doing their best. I thought that was a dumb thing to say. Eventually, I figured out what he meant, and I realized he was absolutely right, that people are always doing the best they can, no matter what it seems like, because they're living out of their thought pattern of that moment. But of course, there's always room for improvement, and when it requires, it only requires an honest change in how we think about things. And we know that's the truth, don't we? You know, when we have a positive attitude, it just seems like things are going well. It's the way it is. And yet, it's easy to take this for granted to the point where we actually don't even bother making those thought changes that are really necessary. So, I think you know that the ideas behind our teaching science of mind, religious science, are actually amazing ideas, and that we need to keep them in the forefront of our daily lives and not just take them for granted. And that's why I thought today I would go back to Ernest Holmes' first book, Creative Mind. You know, and so this is a copy. So I want to tell you, I could not find my copy of the book. And in our email, I sent everyone a link to an online copy of the book, and so I actually read it online, and it was great. A lot of good things happened for me after reading the book again, including finding the book. Oh, okay. It's like, well, whenever I put that book, I'll just look one more time, and I found it instantly. It's funny. But you know, it's easy, especially this week for us. But it's easy for us to slip into thinking that our lives today are hard, confusing, chaotic, and full of catastrophes. Stuff happens, fires, tragedies, real things that we have to deal with. But I want to say that was also true when this little book, Creative Mind, was published in 1919. Ernest Holmes wrote it during the very same year that World War I ended. During the time when the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, was going full steam. A time when the Spanish flu was raging across the world and killed millions of people. It was actually, maybe even more than today, a time of great hardship, confusion, chaos, and catastrophe, but it was also a time of excitement. And so I wanted to just share a little bit about Ernest Holmes, the man. And if you want, you could go to the Science of Mind archives and read a lot more about him. But it seems to me that it's important for us to reflect on the fact that Ernest Holmes was really an ordinary fellow. He had a pretty ordinary background for those days. He was born on a farm in Maine. He was raised in a fairly poor but literate family. When he was 18, he went down to live with relatives in Boston, where he was able to study, and he worked in a store. And during this time, he met a Christian Scientist and learned about Christian Science, which he found interesting, but he didn't completely agree with it. And he also began reading Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays. And he became really excited about Emerson's essays. Years later, he said that reading Emerson for the first time, the first half dozen lectures or essays, gave me a realization that in a certain sense, every man has to interpret the universe in terms of their own thinking and their own personal relationships. And that in order to do it, A person has to have faith and confidence in their own interpretation. And think about it. At that time, he was only 20 years old. The Victorian era had just come to a close. Teddy Roosevelt was president. And at that time, World War I hadn't even started, much less ended. American women still couldn't vote. They soon got the right the next few years. American life expectancy was less than 50 years. And in that year, 1907, when he was 20, interesting, 1.2 million immigrants entered the U.S., the largest number of any year, all the way up until the 1990s. So amazing. There was a lot of change and excitement in the air. And of course, the Prohibition era had just begun. I'm sure that in many ways it was an exciting time to be a young man in Boston. There he was, in the midst of all that. 20 years old, and so excited about reading Emerson. Who's read Emerson? Did you get that excited? But interesting, I think this is something of note to me. So during this time in his life, when he was in Boston, he was suffering from a constant problem with his throat. And as he studied and continued with his studies, he came to believe that the problem with his throat was actually caused by his thought, his concern about how other people were reacting to him when he voiced his opinions. He worried about what people would think about him when he expressed his views. And he later explained that through his reading, Emerson taught me that I must have faith and confidence in my own interpretation of the universe and my relation to it. And then, when he took this to heart and no longer felt afraid to voice his own convictions, indeed, the throat problem disappeared. When he was 25 years old, he moved to Venice, California, right in Los Angeles, to join his brother who had already relocated there. So think about this. He grew up in a really poor farm in Maine, made it to Boston, and suddenly finds himself in Venice, California, right at the time when Hollywood is really starting to hit its heyday. You know, the era of Mary Pickford and all those greats. So I'm sure it was just a great time for him to be there. Well, he got a job working for the city of Venice. He worked in playgrounds and something else. And he also continued with his studies. And it wasn't long before he discovered the writings of Thomas Troward. Who here has read something by Thomas Troward? Did you get excited? He was so excited by it. And I'm glad he was, because what he managed to do is take all those volumes, really by Emerson and Troward, and internalize them, and then bring them forth to us in a way that we could understand and relate to. So, in the writings of Thomas Troward, reading them, Holmes became convinced that there is an impersonal law of the universe that is creative. That we use that very same creative power to create our own joys and sorrows. That wherever spirit is at all spirit must be. That spirit is not divisible. And as we say, there is no spot that God is not. There is no spot where all of God is not. And he came to believe that we can use this creative power within us to consciously change our life for the better. And we've heard this many times, but just imagine, if you can, what it must have been like to be a young person discovering it and pulling it all together for the first time in a way that ordinary people could understand. He was very close to his brother, and they collaborated and shared ideas. And of course, by then there were many other New Thought ministers, and he read many of their books too. But Ernest Holmes had a slightly different take. He tried to take a what you would call scientific or logical approach, and through his studies and through his use of logic and through his experience, he developed this way of spiritual mind treatment, which we've already been using this morning. In fact, he even thought he should open up a spiritual counseling office. And he tried that, but it really didn't go anywhere. He did that when he was about 28, but he quickly closed it, and he just continued working for the city. And then someone noticed the books on his shelves and said, "Oh, what are you reading?" And he talked about it. He said, "Oh, let's have a, would you like to come over and talk about it with a few of my friends?" And soon he was meeting with small groups, and then larger groups. And then when he was 29, he was invited to give a lecture on metaphysics, and I love this. They paid $1 to rent the library. Admission was 25 cents. And they had 15 people come, listen to him. He made $5 in the end because he also did some counseling for people afterwards. So he made $5, which was really a lot because back then minimum wage was 28 cents. 28 cents an hour, so $5. That was a good little feedback, right? And there you go, things began to snowball for him in a wonderful way, and soon he was speaking to larger and larger crowds, and it wasn't long before he wrote that book, Creative Mind. Creative Mind is in the public domain now. It's easy to find it. It's very inexpensive. I do want to say, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about the book, that at this point in his life, he had not yet studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins. And she did play, I believe, an important role in his ideas, helping him really get the importance of going beyond the logic and the understanding of the ideas to going to that very deep level of belief, of faith in the divine nature of the universe, which we use when we do our prayer treatments. But the book Creative Mind lays down the basic concepts in a really direct and easy way to read. So I recommend it, because when it comes to understanding life, as Ernest Holmes said, we need to begin at the beginning, which means we need to begin right where we are. And so I think we should also begin like he did, with enthusiasm. Let these ideas be new to us. So I thought I'd read a few excerpts from the book today, and I want to challenge you to just imagine maybe that you're hearing these ideas for the first time. And I know a few of you are younger than me, so I want to remind you that back when he was writing, it was considered proper to use the word man instead of the word person. That was considered back then to be a generic term for a person. And also that God was often referred to as a he. So I didn't really want to change his words, but I do kind of want to give a little disclaimer. So you don't think he was backward in his thinking. He wasn't. So, I'll start with the introduction. He wrote, "The hand of eternal progress is brushing the cobwebs from the corridors of time and is again revealing to the human race the mysteries of being. As there is nothing new under the sun, the searchlight of truth is bringing to light only what has been known to the few in all generations. The time has now come when the few must become the many. The whole world, from the least to the greatest, must know the truth, so that man may understand the great laws that govern his life. He must learn to control his own destiny, to heal his own body, and bring happiness to his own soul. Ignorance must vanish, and understanding must be ushered in. Man is no longer to be governed by anything outside himself. The time is at hand. We are in the greatest age of all history. We are in the age of the unifying of all people and all things into the ever-present one." Quoting the Bible, he said, "The temple is not made with hands." This idea, the temple is not made with hands, is now being silently built by the emancipated souls of the planet. That was paragraph 1. The whole world must learn the truth. That's what he said. But I just want to share. Last year, when we were teaching one of the newer Centers for Spiritual Living classes, I was kind of shocked that in the material they had a page that they took out of Oprah's magazine. I was like, oh, I don't like that. It seemed like they took Ernest Holmes' teaching and they just kind of passed it around and printified it and then fed it back to him. But I think Ernest Holmes would have been thrilled. He would have been thrilled that this teaching has gone out into the world so much that people read it in all kinds of magazines and you see it in all kinds of movies and they don't even necessarily realize that it comes from New Thought at all. It's just wonderful evidence to us that indeed the truth is becoming known step by step. So then at the beginning of his first chapter, part 1, in the beginning, he wrote, "In the beginning, God." Clear and expressive are these words. In the beginning, God only, no manifest universe, no system of planets, nothing of form or life, of brute or man. God was the spirit of all that was to be, but he had not yet moved upon the waters. Then this all being moved, or began to create. Where did spirit move? Upon what did it move to create? Where did it get a pattern? What means of power did it employ? Through what agencies did it work? In short, what is the world, ourselves included, made out of? And how did we and all else come into being? These questions, correctly answered, would solve the problem of being and set men free. Let us consider. The Spirit was all. There was nothing but itself, all-inclusive everywhere, infinite. This, all spirit, could not have had the impulse to move unless it were self-conscious. Therefore, the Spirit, God, the Spirit is the power that knows itself. It is, accordingly, all-knowing as well as all-present. Being one, undivided, whatever it knows all over, instantly. We find then, he wrote, spirit operates through self-knowing. It moves, and that inner movement must be one of infinite power, moving upon itself, since it is all. It moves, and with definite purpose. The spirit then moves upon itself and makes out of itself all that is made. In other words, what we see comes from what we do not see through some inner intelligence at work, which knows that there is no power but itself. He goes on, the only possible operation of intelligence is thought, or the Word. So all things were made by the Word, and quoting the Bible, he writes, without the Word was not anything made that hath been made. So here Holmes is clearly using the term, the Word, as it is used in the Bible. And he says it means thought. That the Word refers to thought. And when you hear a practitioner doing a spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer, you will often hear the practitioner say, I speak my word. It's a way that we're able to focus on our conscious thought and bring it into the forefront of our mind. So continuing on, Holmes wrote, and I think this is amazing, there's nothing like being a young person for being. But he wrote, how simple the process of creation is when we understand it. I love youth. Each life, human or divine, each manifestation is a different kind of word coming into expression. The great fact to dwell upon is that spirit needs nothing to help it. It is self-conscious. It has all power and all ability to do whatever it wishes to accomplish. It operates simply by speaking, thinking, by the word. We should keep this in mind. The spirit makes all things out of itself. Everything comes into being without effort. And when we exert ourselves, and he means when we start struggling within our own thoughts, we're not in accord with the creative spirit in the way in which it works. The impulse of the spirit to move must be caused by a desire to express what it feels itself to be. I think it's good, right now, just look at these flowers, right? This is the natural world at work. Beauty, warmth, color, life, love, and power, all things else we find in the manifest universe are attributes of spirit and are caused to spring forth into being through the word, because, and this is a very important concept for us to remind ourselves of. He says, all things are caused to spring into being through the word because the Spirit wants to enjoy itself. So do you think that was a radical statement to make in 1918?
Yeah.
Everything is springing into being through the word because Spirit wants to enjoy itself? This is a time when most people had the idea of a very wrathful and vengeful God. And here he is. I think at this time, I forget how old he was, but I don't know, 30, around 28, 30. He's saying, oh, no, God wants to enjoy itself. That's why there's life. And next, maybe something he said that might then at least have seemed even more radical. He said, when we realize that man or woman, we are like God, and man could not be otherwise being made out of God, we will realize that our word also has power. Because if there is but one mind, then it follows naturally, logically, that our word, our thought, is the activity of that one mind in our consciousness. The power that holds the planets in their place is the same power that flows through us. We must place the word where it belongs, whether it is the word of God in the universe or the word of the man in the individual. It is always first, before all else, in the beginning. And the effect, or the visible thing, whether it is a planet or a peanut, it's all made out of the same thing, the only thing. What we need to do is to learn how to use the word so that all will come to see that we are creative centers within themselves. Here is the amazing truth. We live our lives immersed in an infinite creative medium, which will create for us whatever we believe. But we need to awaken to this fact and learn to understand what it is, how it works, and how to use it. It is up to us. And, he's made it easy to understand. Creative Mind is a simple little book. This thing called You or this thing called Life are simple little books. I know that the textbook, The Science of Mind, is not a simple little book, but you don't need to read it all. You just pick chapters. I have barely touched the surface of his book, Creative Mind. I mean, I only really read from a few pages. The first part, he's talking about how it works, what it is, how it is that there's only one thing. He's trying to explain the logic when we say Spirit is all there is, then that everything is created by Spirit becoming that thing, that thought, that idea. And then this next part of the book, he does give some illustrations about how to use it, how to think about it in our own daily lives. But I just want to urge everyone to carve out some time to think about these ideas with greater enthusiasm and greater openness and a greater willingness to try it out for yourself. be open, open the door to your good. Think about what it would really mean to your life when you believe that you have the power of decision, the power of choice. When you really believe that we're all free, that there is a power for good, that we can use it if we choose, and we're using it when we're being semi-conscious anyway, so we might as well be conscious of our thoughts. Is it going to mean that you can be healthy? Healthier than ever before? Healthier than the day before? Does it mean that you can have good relationships better than yesterday? Does it mean that you can live prosperously, enjoy a more beautiful lifestyle than the day before? Does it mean that you can live freely in a country and feel safe and at peace? It's time for us to begin making these thoughtful choices that are in alignment with this thing called life. And this is how, together, we are all constantly planting the thought seeds for a better tomorrow. I want to say that when the fires and the winds blew up in Los Angeles, I know certainly because I get a lot of communications from other ministers, suddenly many minds began to pray for the winds to die down, for the fires to calm down. And while we're unable to roll back the clock, we are able to influence, our own sphere of being, how we live. And so I just want to urge you to, next time you pick up your morning reading, imagine it's for the first time. How great it is. So, thank you very much.